What's up, everybody? Hey, Tom Laird here, host of the Advice from a Call Center Geek podcast and founder of Expedia. For exceptional contact center outsourcing, trust Expedia. We're fully AI-driven, as all of you know, and can handle voice, email, chat, and all of your digital channels. Our 600-seat USA contact center is expert in healthcare, financial services, insurance, tech support, retail, and more. Experts on the NICE CX1 platform, we ensure seamless customer experiences. DM me or visit expediausa.com for more.
This is Advice from a Call Center Geek, a weekly podcast with a focus on all things call center. We'll cover it all from call center operations, hiring, culture, technology, and education. We're here to give you actionable items to improve the quality of yours and your customers' experience. This is an evolving industry with creative minds and ambitious people like this guy. Not only is his passion call center operations, but he's our host. He's the CEO of Expedia Interaction Marketing Group and the Call Center Geek himself, Tom Laird.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Advice from a Call Center Geek, the call center contact center podcast. We try to give you some actionable items to take back in your contact center, improve the overall quality, hopefully improve the agent experience and the customer experience as well. My name is Tom Laird. I'm the CEO here at Expedia Interaction Marketing. We're about 650 seat call center outsourcer now located here in the States in Northwestern Pennsylvania. And when we talk about actionable items to take back in your contact center, I think we have an episode today that's going to really get at the heart of that. So before I begin, just as always, we are on LinkedIn Live. So if you guys have any questions, any comments on that, we'll pick you up there. I'm also on TikTok Live as well. So any questions coming through on TikTok that are I think helpful to the discussion, we'll throw them up here as well. I have a guest today from EvaluAgent. Chris Mounce is a QA expert, has been in the contact center for the majority of his life, has really focused on the coaching aspect and has developed some really, I think, good tips, tactics, techniques that we're going to talk about today, from not only just coaching and improving your coaching, but the scorecard, all the things that I think are very core to making contact centers better. We've here in the podcast, we've kind of gotten away from this, right? Chris and I were talking before.
Yeah.
So much has happened in technology, right? With ChatGPT and all this stuff that people have questions that I think even the podcast has maybe wandered. So we're using this one here to kind of focus back into your contact center and into some of the things that I think can really be beneficial to everyone, from that experienced contact center agent to the new supervisor, to that person in QA who may be experienced or just starting out in their contact center journey. But Chris, I want to welcome you to the Advice from a Call Center Geek podcast. Why don't you give a quick couple minutes or a minute here on just a little background, and we'll get going.
Yeah, happy to.
For you.
Thanks for having me on, Tom. I'm super excited about having this conversation today, because QA is such an emotive topic. Chris Mounce from EvaluAgent, and I'm based in the west coast of Scotland, hence the funny accent.
No, really? I didn't.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone tells me I've got an accent, but I don't believe it. But I've been around contact centers for the majority of my career. Started as an agent. And I think that's kind of the same story for a lot of people that find themselves in the contact center world, right? But when I found myself in coaching and QA, I kind of knew that was the place that I needed to be. And what's interesting is a specific moment that I attribute to that fact. And to be honest, I only had this realization fairly recently, and it was back when I was 19 and I was working for the city, a local authority in a small office, and it was my job to answer the phone. And that was the call center. It was one phone, one phone number, and one person answering, and that was me. And I'd only been there, I think it was a few weeks. It wasn't long, so I really had no clue what I was doing. And I remember answering the phone one day to a very, very angry customer who, unleashed his fury to me. It was both barrels, proper shouting. And, he knew that I didn't know what I was doing, which didn't really help, because when, and it doesn't help, you just get angrier and angrier when you're that customer. But when he got tired of shouting, he passed his phone to his wife, who'd done the exact same thing before passing back to him. And it was awful. You know, and I don't remember what it was about. That's the thing. But what I do remember is how it made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the adrenaline was pumping. I could feel my heart beating in my chest. I could hear it. Hands all clammy and things. And the phone that I was using, you know, that was, you know, I was back when I was 19, so it was one step up from a rotary phone. And there was no tech on that phone. It was literally just a push to mute button. And I pressed that and asked the room, anyone in the room, for help. And, you know, everyone ignored me. Not one person lifted their head to help. And meanwhile, that customer, he could hear that click of the button. You know, when you put it on mute, you just hear that little click. So you can imagine how, you know, he reacted when he realised I had put him in mute. Not the best way to handle a call, admittedly, but gosh, that was awful. And the thing is, I mark that as a significant event as to why I find myself in coaching and learning and development. I would never see anybody ask for help like that and, you know, have it ignored. Now, I will say the customer, he did call back up, right, and apologise, or, you know, so I was told. That was just maybe to make me feel better. But in the grand scale of things, he done me a favour. That was significant, that interaction. And this is where I find myself in coaching. It makes a difference to people, and that's the key thing. It's cool.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it is. It's a little bit almost like a lifeline, right? When you have somebody who is either the leader or that QA person or that person who has the experience, who can kind of put their hand out, right? And not only help with that call, but then also, you know, kind of give you the skills that you know what to do as these things progress, so that the next time that you have that irate customer, you know, things can be a little bit different. But Chris, let's start this. I mean, there's so many things that we want to talk about today. I think, you know, one of the big things that I get a lot of questions on is, and even when we have a new BPO client that comes into us that has never set up their QA. And so one of the first things that we talk about is a scorecard or some type of scoring mechanism. And everybody has their kind of take on it, from, you know, just doing things in Excel to creating, you know, real robust type things with AI and kind of that whole thing in between. But can we start with just maybe some of the do's, some of the don'ts, some of the things that you've seen work really, really well when somebody is setting up their scorecard from a QA standpoint, from a quality standpoint?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the thing is, when we talk about quality assurance, there's a maturity curve, and you alluded to that just there, Tom. It's essentially a journey that organizations are on when it comes to QA, and everyone is at different stages. But it all starts with spreadsheets, doesn't it? Excel's played a huge part in QA over the years. Now, spreadsheets, they're okay in the beginning, you know, but they can become difficult to work with, especially as the contact center scales and grows. And that's where, you know, when dedicated QA software platforms, you know, like EvaluAgent come in, you can empower your teams with manual QA and, you know, facilitate a culture of continuous improvement and using automated workflows and integrations. And then there's that next step. You mentioned this, you know, moving into analytics and auto QA to further reduce risk and improve efficiencies. And then there's that last step where you're engaging all of your users to act on the data. You know, you're reporting on manual and auto QA results in a way that empowers and encourages both leaders and agents to act. So it's connecting everything together all in the one platform. But the thing is, regardless of where a contact center is on that journey, the scorecard is a common factor of any QA program. And, you know, it's known by, you know, many names, you know, scorecard, monitoring sheet, matrix, grid. But ultimately, it's a clear and concise way to track elements that are important and allows for quick identification of areas that are performing well, and of course, areas that need improvement. So it's helping you focus your QA efforts and drive performance improvement. So it's pretty important. And the thing is, I don't think there's any doubt anywhere as to how important it is. And I think perhaps that's why sometimes there's an urge to get every single thing that you can think of into that scorecard. And,
Right.
You know, I get it. You know, if it's in the scorecard, you can measure it and you can report on it. But it comes at a cost, though. You know, the bigger your scorecard is, the longer it's going to take to do manual QA on it. You know, auto QA is different, but we can touch on that later. But I came across a scorecard fairly recently, and it had over 150 line items or questions on it. And, I don't know about you, Tom, but that's a record for me.
That's long.
And I remember looking through it. It was on a spreadsheet, and I was just scrolling and scrolling. I felt like I was never getting to the end of it. And, I can't even imagine the amount of time that it would take to actually score an interaction. Now, the thing is, if every piece of insight that was gotten from that scorecard, those 150 plus questions, if that was truly valuable and actionable, then, I guess, based on where they were in the maturity curve, it would be justified. But that's a perfect example of outgrowing a spreadsheet. The requirements are becoming more complex. There's more data needed. There's more insight. It's becoming a monster. And the longer that it takes to score with it, it means that your QA coverage on your conversations gets smaller. With a manual process, you typically have between 1% and 5% coverage of your conversations. That's all the conversations that are happening between customers and agents. And you can't really afford to have that percentage being any smaller than it already is. So it's definitely worthwhile putting in time and forethought into the creation of a scorecard, because it means that you'll end up with a tool that gives you invaluable data. And if you're monitoring and analysing that data on a regular basis, you can continually identify areas for improvement and make adjustments, which ultimately leads to better performance and higher levels of customer satisfaction. But when it comes to your scorecard, the line items or the questions, the things that you're measuring, they're what ensures that the scorecard's effective and driving quality performance. So, you need to identify the right things to measure. Now, a good place to start is to identify the overall objectives of the contact center. It seems a good place to start.
Yeah.
So this will help you ensure that the scorecard is focused on the most important areas and that it's actually aligned with your goals and priorities. Now, a scorecard, any scorecard, is going to give you an outcome, right? A quality score, regardless of the line items that they make it up. So you want to make sure that those metrics are a true representation of quality in your contact center. Because if they're not, the results and the overall program becomes devalued and it becomes a tick box exercise. And that's the worst thing a QA program can be, is tick box. But the trouble is, the senior stakeholders, they'll still look at that figure as being the truth, rightly or wrongly. So I think there's a few things that you can do to help identify what should be in your scorecard. You can gather feedback from your stakeholders, team members, managers, your customers. Understanding your customers' needs will help you identify areas that are most important to them, and you can tailor your scorecard to suit. Now, Tom, I don't know if you've seen this line item before, but I've seen this a few times where the scorecard question is, did the agent use the customer's name 3 times during the call? Right. And really, how important is that to the customer, that you use the name 3 times? Speaking as a customer, I absolutely like having great rapport with an agent, which, does include using my name, but I'm not fussed if it's used 3 times. Plus, if you're trying to force it, then it's going to have the opposite effect because it feels fake.
And Chris, let me kind of jump in here too. I think, I've done a couple videos, like, this is the perfect timing for where I kind of personally call it false hustle, right? Where coaching, I coach basketball, and, we have kids that, they're in the wrong spot. They're not where they should be, but they are given maximum effort. They're trying, they're hard, right? They're diving when they shouldn't. Like, and again, I've kind of labeled that as false hustle. And it kind of like when you go to a QA scorecard and I hear, that I have to thank the customer after every single piece of information, right? So can I please have your last name? Thank you. Can I have your last 4 digit social? Thank you. Like all of those types of things that, to your point, that C-level executive thinks is what creates good customer experience can actually be the total detriment. And if we're scoring that and holding our reps to that standard, that becomes a huge detriment to the whole CX process.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting when you talk about, like thanking the customer after every piece of information. And I think I don't know if it's maybe just our ears are trained to pick up on these things, but I remember this was a few years ago. We were in a restaurant and I was there with another QA colleague, interestingly. So we picked up on this immediately. When the waitress came over to, take our order and bring drinks and food and things. Every time, literally every single time you said thank you to her, she would respond with, "You're welcome," which, that's a great thing to respond to when somebody thanks you. But we picked up that any time that it was said, she would respond with that. So we made it a point of saying it as much as possible. And like clockwork, I'll give her credit, she stuck to that repertoire, but every single time it was, "You're welcome, you're welcome." Yeah. And it had we made a joke of it, but it had the potential to have the opposite effect as to what she was looking for if you overuse it and it becomes a fake trigger, a false hustle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris, how do you, even setting up, I understand. So now we're going to look at, what's important to our business, to our customers. Most people, how we would do it, right, is we kind of set it up to the flow of the call, try to find those, whether it is the kind of the opening, whether we're trying to verify information, if there's any type of cross-sell, upsell. What are some recommendations for kind of segmenting the different areas of the call to make sure that we're hitting the everything, but not everything, if you know what I mean? Like what you said with 155 different pieces.
Well, that's the thing. It's making it, as easy as possible to actually evaluate your conversations. If you're spending 2 hours evaluating a conversation, it's inefficient. But ultimately, it's about getting the balance between customer and business needs. It's about making customers feel valued. If you get that right, the customer senses that. It's not about saying their name 3 times. They'll pick up that they're feeling valued. They'll feel it and they'll be happy and they'll be confident. Now, the other side of that is, of course, the business needs. Now, if that agent is making the customer feel great, but not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, in the back office, not ticking the right boxes, not, processing the right systems for the customer, they might come away feeling great. But if the agent hasn't done everything, then it's not going to happen for them. And ultimately, they'll feel let down. They'll be disappointed in, in the process and in the organization long term. And, have to get back in touch,
right.
So there's that repeated contact. So it's that constant balance. And what we've seen certainly is that when clients focus too much around the customer measurement without enough focus in business process, the calls do sound great, but there is that high level of repeat contacts. We see that a lot. And that's the worst feeling when you have to phone, back into a contact center because whatever they promised, it didn't happen. It's a tough one. But the other things that we've seen, especially in regulated industries, is where it's all about the process. There's hardly any measurement on soft skills. And as a result, you might be doing everything right, but, the customers are going to be coming off those calls feeling like they've been talking to a robot. And that's an awful experience. It's not a good customer experience.
It's to your point there too. It's define what is right, and I think that's the big question that so many people have. Right? Is that everybody thinks that we should be saying the thank yous and kind of the kind of going through that fake process, the fake empathy, right? But if we did that, the rep did it. Great job. Check their scorecard. Right, compared to the real world scenario that I think you're kind of talking about there too. I think that totally makes sense. Let's move on to that, because I think that's the other piece of this is, all right, we kind of have the scorecard, we kind of have the thoughts around what we should put on, thinking that through. But once we score call, and that call either goes to the floor or. Let's start with, I want to get into some coaching things and some coaching tips that you have that, we talked about that I think are really valuable to everybody here. But the first one we kind of disagree on, but I'm going to let you state your case here. When we talked about who should do the actual coaching, right? Should it be that QA person? Should it go to the supervisor who should do it? In your opinion, how should that work? If once we have that scorecard, that QA monitoring form completed, there's some opportunities for improvement. I love that coaching lingo, right? And also known as the rep screwed up and we got to fix it.
Yeah.
Who should do the actual coaching? Let's start there, and then let's get into what some of the things that we can help with coaching.
So it's interesting, and this is a cool thing about QA. There's so many different ways to do things, and everyone's got their valid opinions, and that's what I love about it. Because you can take all the good things from all the different parts and make an awesome process, I guess. But for me, and speaking from personal experience, if I was handed an evaluation, a scorecard, and it had all the scores and all the feedback, and I was then to take that and deliver a coaching conversation around the back of that, I would find it difficult because it wasn't me that listened to the call. It wasn't me that made the decision. So you're almost speaking for someone else.
Right.
Now, so my feeling is that wherever possible, and it's this is a difficulty. There's always resource and segmentation of teams and so forth. But wherever possible, if you score the contact, if you've made that decision, if you've listened to it, if you've based on the guidelines in that scorecard, you've scored that conversation and gave the feedback, it makes sense that you then deliver that coaching conversation. If the agent has had some difficulty on say objection handling, you can understand what happened in that call. You gave the feedback. I just feel as if you can have that deeper connection with the agent while we are talking through that through the coaching point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, I always found it difficult getting that document asking me to coach. 9 out of 10 times I would have to listen to that call, which kind of negates the work that was done by the actual evaluator.
And then what would you say to, there's a huge difference, right, in this between coaching the actual agent and then giving feedback from the call. And I think a lot of times we confuse both of them, or we hit on one but don't hit on the other and think that we did both of them. If that makes sense. So can you maybe talk about what you think the difference between coaching and feedback, and kind of how we should, kind of maybe maneuver that a little bit?
Feedback it's interesting because I think it's something that a lot of people can dread, both receiving the feedback and actually giving the feedback. And I think, depending on the culture and attitude towards a QA program, it can actually lead people to believe that if they're getting feedback, then they've done something wrong. It might be that the only time that feedback is given is when mistakes have been made. And, I've seen this before, where the very word of feedback has so much negative connotation attached to it. It's dreaded, so the meaning of feedback's lost completely. The thing is, the expectation can also be, if that's the culture in your QA program where feedback's, dreaded, the expectation can also be the one-to-one coaching session that follows that. It's about going over all of those things that have been done wrong. And the thing is, in that scenario, agents will begin into those coaching sessions, dreading it, with their defences up. And as a coach, you'd be dreading that as well. There's no good going to come out of those sessions. But, without feedback, then, agents, they'll just carry on doing what they're doing and think everything is fine. Then when that feedback eventually does come and it's not positive, they're absolutely right to be defensive and wonder why they weren't told before. Now, feedback and coaching, they're so important tools to keep agents on track and improve performance. Now, when it comes to the difference between the two, feedback is about the past and current behaviours, and coaching is about the future behaviour.
I like that.
Coaching,
yeah, that's cool.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when we're talking about feedback, it's feedback on something that's occurred. Coaching is about developing that and changing that behaviour to learn from the feedback. Coaching helps the agent grow, and feedback is more about helping them not fail. But both are about supporting agents to succeed. That's always the aim with anything in the people improvement workflows. It's about making agents the best that they can be.
And, I liked when we were talking, pre-call here, pre-podcast, and just kind of saying, hey, what could add the most value to everybody? And I really liked when you were talking about, and we as a group were talking about coaching as a skill, right? So this is the big mistake, that probably the number one thing when you have a great associate, right, does a really good job. We have a spot open as a supervisor or in QA, however you're kind of set up. We give them that role and just say, okay, here, and then go coach that agent without kind of any type of skill work with that. What are some of the things that we can do as call center managers when we do have that newer agent to try to start to give them the tools that they need to become a good coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's really common, isn't it? High performing agents, they're promoted into QA teams to evaluate and coach, and it's great. I love to see that happening. It's as a coach, when you see your agent develop into those roles, that's a good feeling. That's a win. But the trouble is, it can be bumpy in the beginning, because taking calls and handling customer interactions and having that skill, the unique skills that call center agents have, that's one thing. But coaching is a completely different skill set. One of the key things that I think you need in your coaching sessions is structure. Without that structure, then you don't have any control over the conversation. And
can you talk a little bit about that, the structure that you kind of recommend, or maybe some areas that people can begin to build some structure into how they do their coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the interesting thing in terms of how I came to this realization. Because typically when you move into like a new role, whether that be coaching or whatever, you kind of find a mentor and you just sort of kind of follow them. Where I sort of kind of developed the majority of my coaching skills, where I realized the power of having the structure and using specialized coaching techniques or questioning techniques, it was actually through volunteering with a charity. Now, I think you guys have actually got something in the States in relation to, it was a Samaritans charity. They are there to help people that are going through severe emotional distress. So I volunteered as a listening volunteer, a crisis volunteer, to understand. And it started off with, I wanted to understand what would happen in the situation where someone contacted our call center and said that they were struggling, real emotional distress, because whatever process was refer them to Samaritans. And I wanted to understand what happened, because that was the question that we would be getting as coaches. What happens next? And I didn't know. So I joined Samaritans to understand what happened and what the process was. And it opened up a whole world of been able to support people in a completely different way. And these skills were completely transferable into coaching, which was really cool. Because ultimately, as a Samaritan, you wouldn't give advice to anyone, your own advice. You wouldn't give your own opinion. You would ask the right questions in order to, let the person explore the options that they had for their specific situation. And it was just so cool, so powerful. And those skills, they followed me ever since. It's literally made me a better person. But thinking about, the actual conversations in terms of coaching, there's a quite common scenario, certainly in the beginning, where you're coaching someone, you're fairly new, and the agent is just talking nonstop, and not even about what you were planning to focus on. It's just, continuous. And right. I can certainly remember just sitting there in that coaching session thinking, this is way off track. How am I going to bring this back? And, 10 minutes later you would, but that's 10 minutes that you're not going back.
We've all been there with that, for sure.
And that's it. And it's a learning curve for everyone. I mean, we're all human at the end of the day. And, with the best toolkit in the world, you make mistakes. We're human. It's one of those things. We learn from that. But in terms of the coaching conversation, the coachee does have an element of controlling the conversation. And by that, I mean that you ask, or us as coaches ask, a specific type of question that allows them to answer openly. So as coaches, we need to manage the conversation, and a coaching conversation model can help with that. Now, there's lots of models out there. I mean, just hitting Google, there's a long list. You can have Oscar, Clear, Fuel, Whoop, which, it sounds good, but my favorite is Grow. G as goal. You start off with the end in mind, then you move on to R, reality, and this is where the agent is at that moment in time. Then it's exploring the options for O to achieve that goal, and then it's agreeing the way forward. Now, the thing is, these are all loosely similar. It's about finding the one that suits your conversation style. And I don't like to complicate things, so Grow suits me just fine. So having the coaching model, that's going to give you a structure, but it's not much use if you don't know what to say or ask. And that's one of the most common questions that I hear. If I can't just tell the agent what they've done wrong, what is it I actually say? And the thing is, if you've got a model and all of that sort of thing, and you still don't know what to say, then you simply switch to default mode, and that default mode it's a telling exercise. we just tell the agent, what they need to do differently next time. And, like we're talking there, we've all done that at some point. We're human, but you kick yourself afterwards, right? And, the thing is, for me, it was as soon as the words left my mouth, it was like, I don't believe it. I didn't want to do that, but it's one of those things that you learn, isn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. I love the grow method. I think that was really helpful. And I think, coming up with your own kind of structure with that, again, everybody has their own different personality, right? So to kind of come up with that one structure could be a little bit difficult, but so I like what you kind of talked about there. I think that's extremely valuable. What do you think? What do you think? I'm sorry, not there, but the role of role playing into this as well. Like how does that fit into the structure that you utilize? Do you use that a lot? I mean, we utilize it a ton, and kind of flip it back and forth, right? When you kind of get to instead of just saying, doing, right? And looking at the different aspects of, you know what? I kind of see what you're talking about there when you see it. I mean, what is your feel on role playing and utilizing that technique as well?
Do you know, I like it. It's a really good technique to be able to, because you can control that scenario, because ultimately you're looking for the agent to get a specific, something specific out of that. So you can very much, engineer the scenario to get that outcome. And it's a win-win in that respect. The one thing though that I certainly learned when it came to role play, you need to be able to have built up a good relationship with that coachee. They need to be able to trust you, because you can feel a little bit silly sometimes. All of a sudden you're in that. I'll be the customer and you be the agent, and vice versa. So having that relationship and that trust and that rapport, that's key in that stage. But I used that a ton. I really did, particularly where an agent would struggle to adapt a new way of speaking. For example, running commentary in a phone conversation, where the idea is you avoided dead air, so it was about filling that with relevant conversation. And one of the things that I found that some people were just experts at it, they could talk, all day long. You tended to find that these were the guys that would talk their legs off you in the coaching conversation. But there was other people that struggled with, small talk, or they needed to focus on the, what they were doing on the system to make sure that it was the right outcomes. So role play in that scenario where they could try out some ideas with, no risk. That was super valuable. And that's the key thing. Role play definitely reduces the risk and, lets the agent spread their wings a little bit, but trust is important for them to get the best out of it, I think.
Before we get into kind of the technology piece here, the one thing I wanted to talk about too, when you were talking, about feedback, right? And sometimes the rep can be like, oh man, like here it comes again, right? One of the things I think that needs to be, and anybody who follows me has kind of heard this say as well, is kind of coach and do that feedback privately, right? But when somebody does something great too, right? It shouldn't be just that, right? We have to announce that, like it's celebrate publicly and then kind of coach and give feedback privately, so you're not embarrassing anybody. But when somebody does something good, I think that can be, you got to temper those things where not every time that I'm going to talk to you, it's going to be bad.
That's it. And it's when we're celebrating these successes, we should be shouting it from the rooftops. When we're looking at constructive feedback, that's super easy to, your radar picks up immediately the minute that you hear something in a call that needed to be done differently. I think we get complacent sometimes, Tom, where that the good elements just slip under the radar and we don't highlight them, and we absolutely should be, because as an agent, you want to know you're doing a good job, and you get your your evaluation results and you can have a conversation, but everyone loves that reward and recognition. That's where it's so important to be able to highlight the cool stuff that agents do, because make no mistake, and we all appreciate this in the contact center world. Agents are unsung heroes. They are amazing at what they do, and we need to celebrate that. The skills the agents develop, they'll be with them for life, and that's such a cool thing. People outside the contact center world, I don't think quite understand it, but agents, they're proper cool.
No, for sure. All right, let's move into where everybody's kind of at now. And I want to get your opinion and kind of your company's opinion as well, is because I think you guys are experts in this world and kind of seeing the fusion, right? The now we're moving away from the Excel scorecard and kind of those types of things and moving to somebody who's maybe, I don't want to say they have a more mature organization, but they're ready to have technology come in and have a play. So I have a couple questions on this for you guys, or for you, Chris, but let's start first with, I'm a big analytics guy. I'm a big sentiment analysis guy. Believe in sentiment even more than getting into, NPS and CSAT and those types of things. Can you talk about kind of where maybe QA is now, and especially maybe talk about a little bit on your platform as well from the AI standpoint and the analytics standpoint, and kind of how we can start to correlate, sentiment with QA scores? Is one more important than the other? Do we see them melding together? How do you kind of just maybe an overarching technology of QA with kind of the old school way, and where are we with that?
Yeah, it's a super exciting time, and like you, the embrace technology. The things that it does, it excites me. And QA, the things that is happening in QA when it comes to AI and and auto the automation, it's super exciting. It's going to change the way that we work, I believe, for the better. Because when we think about that traditional approach to QA, you're randomly sampling, like a small fraction of the conversations. That 1 to 5% is such a small percentage. So there's 95% of the conversations that are just being left unchecked. And really, there's the huge potential to miss high risk conversations, reputation damaging conversations. So the cool thing about QA is those foundational elements, the purpose always remains the same, finding the conversations, scoring them. But as technology evolves, it gives us a smarter, more efficient way of working. And that's where, sentiment and analytics or auto QA can really supercharge the way that we work. You can increase that conversation coverage from, that 5% to 100% and drastically increase your chances of finding the needle in the haystack. So if you think about it, if you're getting that 100% coverage, I can look at all of the conversations that are happening in the contact center, and I can understand broadly what they're all about, because topics that I've built to look for, combinations of words and phrases, which if they're said at the right time and in the right combination, it suggests something about the conversation. Is there a suggestion of customer vulnerability? Was empathy present? Was there negative sentiment? Did the customer talk about a complaint? Did the agent take ownership? So with that process happening across 100% of conversations, you know more about what's going on. But the key thing here is what you do with that data. That insight needs to be actionable. Because if you, and this is, you alluded to this, Tom, in terms of organizations that are maybe, higher up in the maturity curve, they are utilizing auto QA. And, the reason that we talk about, the different stages in that maturity curve is, if you're coming from spreadsheets, for example, and then you're turning on full auto QA, it can potentially be overload. All of a sudden you're getting, reams and reams of data that you don't know what to do with.
Right.
So that's why it's building up the different levels so that when you're ready for it, it's not so overwhelming and you get full value.
Chris, what is speaking of this, what is auto QA? Like for everybody, right? Can we, how, because I get this question a ton and I have my kind of way of kind of talking it through, but love to hear the answer you give, right? Of maybe where we are right now with that to where we're going with that. But
yeah,
everybody thinks I'm going to just create a scorecard and it's going to literally come out with numbers and score perfectly. I mean, we're kind of more higher arching things like you just talked about there than getting to that level. Do you ever see us moving with a chat GPT or some type of integration or technology that you guys would have, right? To be able to just literally every call is getting scored, right? From almost the human being type of score instead of kind of that high end kind of, did they kind of do this? Was their tone right? Those kind of things. Yeah.
And it's auto queue is an amazing bit of technology, because ultimately, where you're getting that 100% coverage, every contact that's coming in into your contact center, that's been analysed. So with calls, they're transcribed into a text format, and then with the topics that you're looking for. So you're maybe looking to you've got a topic for, say, complaint, empathy, vulnerability. The platform would utilise a complex word and phrase search engine to look for those combinations of words. So when those topics are then applied onto the conversation, you've got that deep understanding of what's happening in the contact center. Now, with that information, you can deploy what we call auto QA scorecards. Now, this is where, based on the topic, so if you have a complaint, for example, you can create a specific auto QA scorecard on complaints that will automatically deploy when that type of conversation happens. Very so imagine that across 100% of your conversations. That's giving you a heck of a lot of data. Now, the cool thing is that it's never intended to replace the manual elements. It's there to supercharge them, because what you can then do with that data is look for those high-risk conversations rather than just being random. So I can look for conversations that contain complaint, for example, but additionally, conversations that have also failed the auto QA scorecard on complaints. So when that then gets to the manual QA to evaluate, they can check through that scoring. They can add deep, actionable feedback to enrich that coaching conversation, and that's the key thing. It's about enriching the coaching and giving the agent what they need. But when you mention ChatGPT, Tom, this is something that I'm super excited about. We are working on releasing Smart Score at EvaluAgent, and this is essentially powered by ChatGPT. And the cool thing is the way that we're looking at this is that it's a co-pilot for evaluators, so it can go through that process of tagging conversations with relevant topics, but additionally, it can score conversations in the moment. So essentially, you click the button, it'll score the conversations based on how you've told it to score. When you build your scorecard, you build in the prompts and tell it how to score. It will then produce reasons as to why it scored it in that particular way, and coaching insights as well. So if you think about the time that you spend, marking through all the conversations, ticking the box, and ultimately, again, we're human. So if you've got 100 of those to do, you cannot give the same level of attention to every single one of those. Your attention levels start to go down. But with having that co-pilot, you can get those rich insights to then drive the coaching conversations. If you're struggling to know what to talk about in your coaching conversations, those insights are there to help. It's really, really exciting, because really the people improvement parts, that's the key thing. And QA, the evaluation element, it's a means to an end. But you use that data to drive the people improvement, the coaching and performance managing agents to ultimately drive up that performance. It's very exciting. It's absolutely going to change the way that we work in QA by freeing up that time.
I love how you talk about think about that, like 100% of your calls going through that type of a process, the amount of data that you would be getting. It's almost like we have to rethink everything. We have to rethink kind of how the process will work, right? Between, just picking the right ones, picking maybe, the I don't want to say high value or high issue type calls, but then also finding the really, really good calls. That's going to be very easy to do as well, right? To try to kind of balance that. So no, it is. It's almost like, I don't want to say one step forward, two steps back, because that's not right. It's probably 5 steps forward maybe, and then we have to just reevaluate a little bit on what we're doing, because there's so much really exciting thing. I love how you're kind of the first company I've seen to really articulate that extremely well with some of the things that are coming. So let me give you the quick kind of, before we kind of wrap this up. You guys are going to be at Call and Contact Center Expo, correct?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. So next week we'll be over in Vegas.
Okay, I will be there too. So, I'll be hanging out with these guys. So if anybody, listening in the next week or so before that happens, make sure you come and check these guys out, see all the things that they have. And I want to just kind of end with that. Can you, talk about, the EvaluAgent, talk about your company real in kind of a high level. What are some of the things that you guys I know you just touched on a ton of things that you're really excited about, but what is kind of your core offering, and what are some of the things that you think can add value to a potential customer?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to EvaluAgent, I guess, we're extremely user obsessed, Tom. We're experts in the contact center field, and we know the use cases, and we know how to make QA better and faster, but not sacrificing quality, because we've lived it. And one of the and I always mention this, I never intend to, but before I joined the business, before I joined EvaluAgent, I used EvaluAgent, the platform and my contact center, and I fell in love with it. The difference that it made, and it just opened my eyes. And when the opportunity came up to join EvaluAgent, I jumped at it. Talking about QA all day, every day was what could be better. In terms of what the platform does, is it's a series of connected workflows. That's one of the major benefits. You're able to bring all of your contacts into the platform, into the one place. You're able to easily take those contacts, make those selections, whether that's specific contacts or a kind of more randomized selection, get them through to your evaluators. Scorecard Builder is super user-friendly, and the things that we touched on when we were talking about scorecard building, you can utilize all of those features to score and evaluate your contacts in a really, really efficient way. One of the things that we saw with a customer coming from spreadsheets using the scoring method that we use in EvaluAgent, they saw productivity increase by 285%. That's massive.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, the way that the QA is done and evaluations feed into rich reporting, so you're able to report on any level of your business at any point, real time, to understand the quality performance in your organization. But it's how it all feeds seamlessly into people improvement. You can pick up one-to-ones directly from reports. You can track all of that. There's the agent engagement element where agents can acknowledge, they can query, they can appeal evaluations, and that all feeds into one-to-ones and e-learning as well. So there's a fully functional LMS in EvaluAgent that utilizes smart triggers to automatically deploy e-learning when performance dips in specific areas. It's such a huge platform, and I could genuinely talk about it all day.
I love how you were a customer who then joined the company. I think that says a lot. Chris, any social media that you want to throw out there for anybody who would like to follow you? Twitter, on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You'll just find me under Chris Mounce.
And Chris,
see my smiley face.
Chris is going to be doing, and I'm announcing this for Chris because he's such an expert in this, but over the coming next weeks and months, he's going to be doing a bunch of stuff on QA from a content standpoint. So make sure that you are following him. Make sure you guys follow EvaluAgent. I think there's going to be a lot of really cool things that they're going to be putting out as well. So Chris, thank you so much. Again, it feels so good to get back to the core of the contact center and trying to help the on-floor agent, the supervisor, the QA person, the call center manager do their job more efficiently, do it better, give them more confidence. And I think hopefully with the podcast and a lot of the tips that you talked about today, we are able to do that with a lot of people out there. Please make sure anybody listening now too, if you are going to Call and Contact Center Expo, I'll be walking the floor, say hi to me, but make sure you guys go out, see a demo, check their booth out.
Please stop by.
Very cool stuff. Coming over from the UK too. So
all the way over from sunny Scotland.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. And I'll talk to you guys next week.